So, to create a nonprofit organization, these are kind of like you have to have these things done before you can do anything else. I didn't use an attorney. I didn't have a connection to an attorney at the time. I did get a connection. I think it was to an intern who at least reviewed our stuff at the beginning. And then now we do have an attorney who sits on our board. And now that we're a lot bigger, we have had to retain attorneys for certain situations and things like that. But initially, we were able to do all of this on our own. So creating a mission, vision, and values, I put that as number one, and I always put that as number one because what I've learned and what people taught me when we were starting out was that without that, you're kind of just a ship sailing through the ocean without a direction of where you're going. And so having a strong mission, vision, and values is really important. And I'll give you a few strategies about and ways that you can go about doing that. You have to have a board of directors. Michigan law mandates that you have at least 3 board members, and we'll kind of talk through that a little bit. You have to file your articles of incorporation, which I put a sample one in here for you all to access. It's not legal. I put on all my things. This is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving you, but I did want you to have resources. So you can use them. But again, I do recommend that anything you do that you file, you make sure that you have reviewed by an attorney at some level. Securing tax exempt status from the IRS. This is actually just a link to a video that the IRS puts out that shows you how to fill out the 501c3. Most of you in this room probably qualify for the shortened form. So there is a shorter form and then there's a longer form, and it's based on the amount of money that you've received, predominantly your money. So most of you, Tricia, do you know what the limit is? $250. So if you're under $250,000, you can file the short form. So unless you're received more than that, I would recommend you go with the short form. They did not have the short form when we were established, so it took us a while to get through the 501c3 process. As long as you have filed, you can start to do your work while you're waiting for them to approve it at the IRS. I don't know if there's a backlog right now. There probably is. When the government gets close to shutting down, if the government does shut down, that can create even more of a backlog. So, I mean, sometimes if you are checking the status of your application, which I do recommend you call after you've submitted your 501c3 application, you could be on hold for up to 2 or 3 hours. So just be aware. It's a fun wait. And you want to create bylaws, and you can do all of this while your form is in process. And there's a lot that you can do while you're waiting for your form to be approved. Okay. So defining your mission, vision, and values. Like I said, you want to clearly define your mission, and I would recommend you engage your board members and key staff or volunteers in this process. When we went through our merger to form AYA, I think that was the best process we've ever gone through, and I used this process, so this resource alert, I have this on a bunch of slides, which, Marcel, you can send this out to everybody, the whole PowerPoint at the end as well. They're all hyperlinked. So you can just click on it and you can see the resources. But this is a great process. It's kind of lengthy, but it lays out how you can go about establishing your mission, your vision, and your values, which again, like I said, that drives the direction of your work. I recommend, that you memorize your mission. So I can say it right now. AYA creates communities rooted in belonging for youth who are experiencing instability to own their future. It's short, it's concise, it describes what we do, and it uses language that we use. Our core values are inclusion, community, agency, and authenticity. Once you get them, once you work with your board to establish your mission, vision, and values, make sure they're short enough that you can memorize them and that you can share them quickly. I mean, you want to be able to have, what do you do? This is what we do. My elevator pitch, and I would challenge you to take time to write down a 30-second elevator pitch, refine it, practice it. And so when people say, well, what does AYA do? I say we support youth ages 14 to 24 who are experiencing homelessness or housing instability in Kent County. boom. It's not our mission. That's not like our exact mission statement, but it's a very quick, this is what we do. And then when people ask, well, how do you do that? Then I kind of go into more details. But the elevator pitch is, if you're talking to someone in an elevator and they ask you what you do, you have a short synopsis that you can just quickly roll off your tongue every single time. And we actually have done activities where we make our board write down their elevator pitch as well, so that every single one of our board members, every single one of our staff members, every single one of our volunteers is able to say the same similar things and answer those questions really quickly. And then, like I said, the mission and the vision should align with the organization's goals. You have to have a board of directors. Like I said, Michigan law requires at least 3. I think when we started, we had maybe 4. Don't go too big yet. Now we have a board of 12 and we'll have 15 here soon. But I would never have wanted a board that large at the beginning. You have to have people who are aligned with what you do, who understand what you do. I don't know if it's controversial, but I take a bit of a controversial stance on board members. A lot of people look for the most connected person, the person with the most money. And I would much rather have people who are passionate about the work and are willing to connect others to the work and who care about what we're doing and that are representative of the community that we serve than deep pockets. We'll figure out funding. There's a lot of ways to go about funding. I want the people that are making decisions about the strategy and the direction of our organization to have lived experience, to understand what we're doing. And so that's my philosophy on board members. So when you're thinking about it, it's like, who are those 3 people that really get what you're trying to do and are really passionate about it and are willing to share it with people that they know? Because honestly, that's going to get you further and get you access to more connections and resources than just having some rich person who doesn't show up. And I've always taken that approach ever since we started. It's hard because we haven't always had those deep pockets at the beginning, but as we've been able to access more grants and other individuals, it's beneficial. I also have taken the position that I would rather have 100 people donating $10 a month than I would one person giving us $50,000. And if we have a community of people that are around us, then if you lose your job and you can't give to us anymore, we still have sustainability because we have a community of people supporting us. And so that's my goal actually for AYA. The next 3 years, our team would probably say 5, but I say 3, is to have $1 million in reoccurring donations every year. And if that means it's a bunch of people giving $5 to $10 a month, like that is meaningful to me, because that means that there's people saying like, I believe enough in this that I'm willing to give and I'm willing to support it. So that's my philosophy around a board. You do want to look for relevant skills. So, maybe if you're really skilled in finance, then you don't necessarily need another finance person on your board, but maybe you don't know how to do communications very well, or you're not quite sure how to do graphic design, things like that you're going to need if you're starting a website. Look for people with those experiences or those expertise that also care about your mission. And like I said, I actually think having a lawyer on every board is really helpful. So if you can ever find a lawyer, it is very helpful to have an attorney on your board. Again, I have 2 resource alerts here. So this is kind of a work process of how to form a good board structure that I've put together, and then a matrix for recruitment. So we actually give this to board members when they're applying to be on our board, and they check off like where their areas of expertise are, financial support, all of that, and we match that all together when we're looking for new board members. So I thought those would be the most relevant and helpful resources. Every resource I'm sharing with you today I've used personally, so I'm not giving you anything that I haven't used or our organization hasn't used. All right. Any questions on boards? There's a lot of, we could talk about boards for 2 hours. So I tried to give a general overview, but If you do have questions, again, I'll try to save some time at the end.
Is there a minimum or maximum board members, like the number of board members?
Yeah, so the minimum is 3. The maximum is whatever you decide in your bylaws. I think ours is 15 is our max, and I would recommend for an organization under $250,000 to not have more than 5 or 6 board members. It's a lot to manage, because so my perspective as well on boards is it's my role as the executive director, CEO, to manage the board just as I manage the staff. And so I have to invest a lot of time in those relationships and in making sure that we have a strong relationship and that they're connected. The most important relationship between you and your board is your board president. Be very, very thoughtful about who you put in that seat. I would 1,000 times over rather have somebody that I trust and that we can have a strong working relationship with than somebody with money or experience. Like, I don't care, because that person, I've seen so many organizations, it is really hard if you have somebody that's out of alignment with you and your mission in your board president seat, because then you're constantly battling that and you're spending more time teaching your board than you are actually doing the work that you want to be doing. So whatever you can do to have a really strong person in that board presidency that you can have a good working relationship with is my best recommendation. Okay. So you have to incorporate and file paperwork. So I kind of went through this for you. These are, again, this is the samples of articles of incorporation and the IRS 501c3 walkthrough. This resource alert, like when you get this, if you're just trying to find a resource, you can look here. But I also then gave Marciel just a page of all the resources. So you'll have that too. And they're all hyperlinked. If for some reason you can't access them, let me know. I put my contact information on the end here. So if there's something that you want to access and you can't, just shoot me an email and I'll figure that out. Okay, so creating your bylaws. Your bylaws are kind of, they're the governance document of your organization. So I put sample bylaws in here. They're essentially, like I said, though, they're not legal advice. So make sure you run through them with a lawyer before. Don't put me on the hook. But they're essentially the rules of how you govern your organization. So it's everything from how many board meetings you have to have a year, to what committees you have, to how many board members, to what happens if you stop operating, where does the money go to, and all of that is in your bylaws. Again, I put a sample here, put a board member handbook example, which probably should have been on the last slide, but that is helpful as well. Our board member handbook is something that every board member gets when they start, and it outlines their roles, their responsibility, what their role is, and what their role isn't. The attorney that we worked with said, make them more vague. Like, don't try to put too much specificity in your bylaws. Don't get too specific. So, for example, we have multiple committees of our board. We have an executive committee, we have a finance committee, we have a HR committee, we have a advancement committee, but the only committees that are in our bylaws are the executive committee and a finance committee. And then it just says you can establish ad hoc committees as you want in your bylaws. So don't put all your committees, because we just made a decision. We don't want to, we're actually going to dissolve some of the committees now that we have more people on staff to do the work. And we don't want to have to go back and make a bylaw amendment, because then you have to file that with the state and there's like a whole bunch of stuff. So make your bylaws specific enough, but not too specific that you aren't able to grow with them. Budgeting. So I sent you, or I included in here, and they'll come to you as well, 2 Excel spreadsheets. One is for a small budget, so $200,000 a year or less, and 2 employees or less, and more than $200,000 a year, 3 employees and more. So there's a small and a medium-sized budget. Now that we have a $5 million budget, we have a finance person on board. We did not have that when we started, and I'm not you heard my background's in education and social work, but I did learn it. I learned QuickBooks. I learned budgeting. I've learned how to do a journal entry, which is something I never thought I would need to know. But now I don't do any of, if I got in the books, it'd be a bad situation. So I don't do that anymore because we have a team. But at the beginning I did, and I worked with individuals who know as well. My recommendation is, if you can find the funds, to work with a nonprofit specific bookkeeper. If you mess it up, it's hard to fix and it can create a lot of problems. And so for me, in terms of capacity, my recommendation is that I put 2 links up here. These 2 I have not worked with before, but I have heard and read some reviews about them. But really, it is very, very helpful if you have either someone on your board who's willing to do it for free, who has the expertise, make sure they're like an accountant or a bookkeeper, or you outsource it, because it's just such a specialized set of skills, and it is a large ramp up to get those skills. So I've always had somebody working with me on our books. I've never just done them alone. I just learned a lot through those people and now understand it a lot more. So I would say find someone who can be on your board that understands finances and have that person help you with your budget. For me, whenever we're writing a grant application, I always have to start with the budget. I always have to understand where the dollars are going so that I can create the narrative about what we're doing with it. And so that's how I operate. Not everybody does, but for me, that's what I have to understand. There has to be alignment between a grant budget and your grant narrative. And if there's not alignment there, you're not going to get the money. So for me, I say, okay, what do we really need the money for? And then we work over, okay, and now how are we going to explain this? Because we understand where all the dollars are going. You'll get into grant writing in a little bit, but you have to have an organizational budget, and every grant is going to have its own budget. Sometimes, depending on the grant, depending on the organization, depending on mostly who the grant is coming through, you can submit your organization budget as your grant budget. But more often than that, that's not the case. And so that's where you have to have somebody who understands how to translate. So say your budget, we'll go with easy numbers. Say your budget is $100,000 a year and you're writing a grant for $10,000 a year. You have to explain what part of your budget is that $10,000 paying for. And so you're going to need assistance in figuring out how to do that. So maybe your budget is going to cover $10,000. Maybe it's going to cover some food, and it's going to cover some of one of your staff's time. It all feeds to your big organizational budget. So you have to start with your organizational budget, and then you can figure out what you're going to use your grant budgets on. You got to start with what you are doing.
When you have the general admin costs,
Mm-hmm.
and you have grant-specific funding,
Mm-hmm.
do you proportionally, distribute this administrative cost, or how is that?
Yeah.
Just a general idea.
Yeah. So for us, we charge pretty standard a 10% administrative rate on all of our grants now. When we were starting out, our admin costs were a lot higher than 10% of our budget, because our budget was like $100,000. And at that point, you had like bookkeeping costs, we had utilities, whatever, and we just had to spend more on our administrative costs. So if that's the case, the way we funded that would be through like capacity building grants. And so then we would write we need computers, and we need money for a training, and it'd be more than 10%, but that was okay because that was the purpose of the grant. So am I answering your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there any ceiling on?
Some grants there is, and some grants there's not. Some grants there's a 7.5% admin cost budget, and some grants there's a 10%. I will say that I haven't worked with Tricia, but I've heard great things, and I work with her business partner. So, is really good at figuring out how to get things funded for your work if they're administrative. Even so, for example, I'll give you an example, I think that will be clear. We have a vice president of operations now. So his salary is hard to fund because what he does is almost all admin. But what he does directly impacts youth because we have to have lights on in the building. He manages all of our IT. He manages all of our HR. Like, we have to have him if we're going to serve youth effectively. We see over 650 youth a year. So if we're going to serve that many youth effectively, we need to have these good systems and processes. And so then we're able to write it into the grant like that. And we're going to say, part of our salaries here goes to support our program services and our human resources to make sure that our staff are, doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there are ways to get around it, but I would recommend, if you want to go in that direction, that you work with an experienced grant writer to help you do that, because it can get pretty complicated. I say this to a lot of people. It was harder to run a nonprofit with a $20,000 or $100,000 budget than it is, I should knock on wood when I say this, but than it is to run a budget of $5 million, because I now at least have a team of people supporting me. At the beginning, it was just me just trying to be like, please, I swear we're going to do good stuff. Like, will you please donate? And it's just really hard. So that is where I would recommend leveraging your board. So if you can get a few people who are willing to say, yes, I agree with this, who do know some people in town, then you can start. But even if you get 10 people to give, I don't know, $50 a month, that's $500 a month. It's not a lot, but it's something. And from there, then you can start to build. The other thing is that I don't know what's available through the county in terms of like this, but I do know there are more grants coming out from the county, I don't think the city, the state, and even just local capacity organizations that want to invest specifically in nonprofits that are supporting individuals who are being resettled here or whatever. And so I keep pointing Tricia out, but Tricia and others like her are able to access those grants. And so I think it's a combo. You need both individuals who are willing to support what you're doing, and you need some grant funding to help you get started. Okay.
One more question.
Yeah.
If you're the founder and president of the board, can you pay yourself, or is that a conflict of interest?
Oh, someone might have to help me on the legality of this one. You can pay yourself if you're on the board. So I was on the board and I held a voting seat. I wasn't the president, though. I was the executive director and founder of the organization, and then I found a strong board president to do it volunteer. I'd recommend that. I got paid once we had enough, and we felt like we'd have enough next year to pay me. I think the first year I got paid, I probably made $10,000 that year total, but it was something, and it was the board's effort to say, we want to pay you something because you're working basically 60 hours a week on this, and we want to give you at least some money until we continue to generate more revenue. So you can get paid if you're on the board. You can get paid as the executive director. You can get paid as the founder. I would just recommend you have a good board president who can support you, because they're the ones who will advocate for you to get paid. Now, I don't set my salary. I'm not involved in that process. Our board sets the salary. Our board executive committee sets my salary, and they do my yearly evaluation. So that's why you have to have a really good and trusting relationship with your board president, and that they understand what you're doing. Because otherwise it could go south real fast. It could go bad really quickly. All right. So fundraising planning. I'll start here and then I'll go to here. So you do want to have an annual fundraising plan. And so, like I said, if we keep going with the $100,000 example, if you think your expenses this year are going to be $100,000, I don't even know if I should go for this, but we'll see. There we go. And your goal is to get, you might want to get $15,000 from individuals. You might want to get $2,000 from businesses, which in the nonprofit world we call corporate sponsorship. So it's essentially businesses that say, hey, I believe in what you're doing and I'm going to give you $500. And, you know, when you go to an event, right, have you all been to a nonprofit event maybe where you see there's like logos, like these are the sponsors. And so you put their logo on to show that they're sponsoring the event and they give you some money. So this is corporate sponsors. And then you know, 80, 95, why can't I, yeah, 83,000, right? Yeah. That means you need to find 83,000 somewhere else. And so that's where I would say that's a large chunk of money. I don't have that in my bank account. So you're probably going to want to, that's where you want to seek out some grants to make that happen. Or you want to figure out, well, are there more people that I can get involved? And so that's kind of that's how I do it. That's how we start is I said, here's my ideal state. I always start when I'm budgeting, I always start with what's my end goal? What would make us run perfectly? I never get that. So then I back it down. Well, where can I cut or where can I give some? And so maybe this 100,000, if you back it down, you could get it down to 75,000 and then you need to raise less money for grants, that kind of thing. But you want to have a plan. You want to know how you're going to hit each of these numbers and what activities you're going to do to make sure that you're bringing in each of these numbers. And you want to make sure it's a diverse funding source. So individual donations, corporate sponsorships, events, grants, and even when we started out, youth paid rent. It wasn't a lot, but in our house, they paid $250 a month to show ownership for them. And so that was another revenue stream that also helped us. I put 2 great grant writers here. So you can click on those links. Tricia's one of them, and Tiffany with Igneous Consulting is another. And then, do you have a question? Go ahead, and then I'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, the 100,000 target.
Yep.
I may have missed it from what you mentioned. What is the, how do you set that? What's the mindset?
Okay, so if I'm thinking, what does this next year look like? Or when we were starting out, I knew that we would have to spend, I'd break it down. And I'd say, well, I know that the mortgage on the house that we had, that was going to be $10,000. And I knew that utilities would probably cost us $1,500. And I knew we needed food. And I knew we needed, I'm trying to think of what else did we need. I knew we needed supplies for the house, so, and I knew we probably would need a new furnace. So I would do that. I always start with, what are the costs that we're essentially gonna need? We know we're gonna need 1,000 in food, we're gonna need 500 in supplies, we're gonna need 2,500 on a new furnace, whatever. Start with the absolute essentials. And then whatever was left, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15.5, I believe. Someone can check my math. Whatever was left, this is a big gap, but I would usually end up, once you go through all your costs, you're probably going to end up with maybe like a $20,000 gap. Then that's when I would say, that's when I started to figure out, okay, can we pay me? So if we had, say all our expenses, other expenses, we'll do this, ended up being 75,000, then I'd have $15,000 left. $25,000 left if I can do math. Okay. Then what do we want to spend that $25,000 on? And then I would think about, okay, if I could get $10,000, that'd be really helpful. Or here are the things that would be really helpful to us. And that's how I would budget that final amount. But even to this day, even with a $5 million budget, I generally don't give raises until I see our first quarter, what our revenue is like. So if your goal is $100,000 and you're trying, and you know that means you need $25,000 a quarter, and your first quarter you only brought in $500, you're not going to be able to meet all your expenses. And so then you have to modify. So then I didn't pay myself. And so I always made sure there's like a flex in here of something. I'm going to pause. Am I making sense?
Yes. I'm
Yeah?
just trying to relate this
Okay.
to the mission where the grant is intended for. So let's say, because this is operating expenses, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So out of that, the actual cost of providing the services to the specific mission that the grant is intended for,
Mm-hmm.
is that going to be part of this, or that's a?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you want to do this first.
Yeah.
And then once you have all this figured out, then you work on your grant budget. But you want to get all this figured out.
Which I know.
And I budget as if I'm pretty sure we're going to get a grant, then I include it in our budget. I put it all in our budget so I have one picture of everything. And then from there, my grant stuff kind of flows. Okay. The last thing on fundraising planning is that if you start to get a lot of individuals that are giving to you, I do recommend you can start with Excel. It's free, that's fine. But after a while, you're going to want something that's a little bit more robust to be able to track your donations in. So these are two systems that I recommend because they're compliant. Pardon me, I'm going to get a sip of water. They're compliant. They help you make sure you do all your correct filings in January and all the things. So you can start with Excel. We started with Excel, but we moved pretty quickly to one of these to help us. Okay.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
So this is like something that a lot of questions like mostly we discuss about. So the first question is, like if you're doing fundraising and we have community members, like not work members, just
Uh-huh.
from community. If they are contributing some money, like which we call it as membership fees.
Okay.
Like if you're the member of this community, you will contribute like $5 a month. or
Okay.
$10 a month.
Yep.
So is it legal? How it works?
Yes. Yes.
You can't be a 501c3 and charge membership fees.
Yes.
It's a different classification under the IRS,
Oh,
which, forewarning you, will make it more difficult to obtain grants.
So, but you can do under a 501c3 is a fee for service. So, if you charge for a class you're putting on or an event you're putting on, you can do that. And that would be called program service income. Because so we could charge because you signed leases and they paid rent to live in the houses. That was program service income because it wasn't a membership fee. But, and so if we say we did a health fair and we charged for people to come to the health fair, we wouldn't do that, but that's just an example. that's okay. You can do that because you're providing a service. The key is that it has to be for each service rather than if you do membership fees, it's a whole other classification of a type of organization.
Okay. Another question is about like if we decide that that's one of the ways that we can do the fundraising, like how that process might look like. Like suppose we have the community members and each one is going to contribute $10. It's very hard to collect $10 from each person, like from housing community members. Like has anyone has this experience that like what could be a smooth process for us? That money goes to the bank and after that we get access to it and we can spend it.
Yeah, I recommend using like an online software. So Eventbrite has nonprofit rates, and I think if you're under a certain amount, they let you do it for free. And things like that, where then say you're charging $10 for an event, all that money then just goes in one deposit to your connected bank account. Yeah, so I mean, I'll just fly through this really quickly. This is a detailed strategic planning guide. So once you get to the point of we have our mission, vision, and values, we have a fundraising plan, we're incorporated, you're gonna wanna have goals set out to get you to where you wanna go. This is how you can do that. Again, that's each of these slides probably we could talk about for 2 hours if we wanted to go really in depth. Build community relationships. So I talked a little bit about that and the importance of that. Recruiting volunteers as well. This I do think is helpful once you get to the point of having even volunteers or employees. You do want to understand how you're going to organize yourself and what the reporting structure is. So what is the organizational chart for your nonprofit? Just like if you were running a business, you want to have an organizational chart for a nonprofit as well. So there's the resources there on that full resource list where you can see this is just a very basic example and different types of organizational structures. No, we do not pay our board president and we don't pay any board members, which is different from a business board. Business boards can get paid, nonprofit board members do not get paid. The only person that gets paid is the person working for the organization. So you, the co-founder, the founder, the CEO, the executive director, whoever. I know I don't have a vote on my board anymore, but I'm a part of all discussions. When I started, I had a vote on my board. So I recommend that at the beginning, you have a vote on your board. When that changes over, is up to you. But that's my recommendation. A lot of nonprofit professionals would say the opposite, don't have a vote, but I've just seen too many boards go awry, have problems if the person doing the work doesn't have a really strong voice and influence into the direction that it's going.
Just to reiterate, it is from a grant perspective, it is best practice. It's not illegal or anything, but it's best practice to have an all-volunteer board. It is also a best practice to not have the executive director as the president of the board. The board is supposed to monitor the activities of the organization. They're supposed to hold the executive director accountable. When the board president is the person who is holding that executive director accountable, there becomes a very quick, that's where things can go downhill very quickly. And Lauren, I'm going to assume you were never the board president?
I was never the board president.
Right. And from an ethics standpoint, it is always better to have the people who are holding the executive director accountable be different than the executive director.
I will say at the beginning, it was someone that I knew and trusted that was our board president. So I knew them well. I had worked with them well. They had worked in housing and homelessness for a while. And so I knew them very well, and I trusted them and they trusted me. And that was the best scenario. So the executive director or the person, so on that chart that I drew, there's the board of directors, the person right under them gets paid, and then whoever else you decide to pay. So now, like I said, we have $5 million organization. So we have 30 employees. All of those people get paid. Everybody is paid at our work. And then we have about 500 people who volunteer every year. They don't get paid because they're just volunteering. When we started, we had a lot of volunteers that helped us. So, and they did work, but they just didn't, they said they didn't need to get paid. Maybe they ran our event for us, or maybe they helped youth, but they didn't get paid. Yeah, just because they want to help. Passion for their community, they care, and you can do things for volunteers like we did gift cards sometimes. We'd just say thank you, or we'd have a little event to say thank you and they could eat, and I'd buy them small gifts, but not a lot. You can't give them too much money and then because then they become an employee.
A good example of how many people can get paid for a nonprofit is we all know Corewell Health, all the hospitals, all the doctors' offices in the area. Corewell Health is a nonprofit. Okay? Everybody who works at Corewell gets paid. Okay? So when the money's there, it's okay to pay your employees. And a lot of times your long-term volunteers and cultivating that volunteer network, volunteers often become donors. They often become some of your first employees because they've proven their passion for your mission. So cultivating a strong volunteer network is an amazing opportunity for future growth.
So I didn't go over the different types of boards. Most organizations, when they start, you're going to have a working board. What that means is that your board is helping do this work. So if you're a healthcare organization and you want to have a health fair, your expectation is that your board members show up and help with the health fair. So it's not just coming to meetings. Legally, the purpose of the board is to protect the finances of the organization, protect the organization from fraud, and hold you accountable as the executive director. Those are like the legal duties of the board in a nutshell. There's more, but that's the basic of them. How do I keep my board engaged? I'm careful about who we bring on the board. I make sure it's someone who really, really cares. I don't have too high of expectations. I know that I can't expect the board. They usually are working multiple other jobs and this is not their priority. So I try to meet with them every year, one-on-one, and tell them what is going well and what I would like additional help on. We have a spreadsheet where we track their involvement, what they say they're going to do, and did they actually do it? And we do require every board member to donate financially to the organization. So those are some ways. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. I guess I'll just tell you it's hard. And you're going to have some board members that are amazing, and you're going to have other board members that you're like, yeah, when your term is up, we'll just let you move on. So it depends. We've had board members become employees. They apply for the job and then we hire them, but then they can't be on the board anymore. So the moment they're hired, They're off the board and we just replace them. You don't have to get to 6 board members to have 3 of them be employees. If you can pay them and you want to hire them, I recommend they go through a hiring process, an application process. You can hire them, and then you just would need to find new board members to replace them. So there's no legal process that you have to go through with that. They just can't be an employee, and it's really not best practice for them to be an employee and on the board at the same time.
I would say, as having worked for 4 different family foundations, that would be one of the first things we would look at is the board, the makeup of the board, and we would probably not even consider an application where there's not checks and balances with the board. So it could automatically disqualify you for private foundation funding right off the bat.
You attend the meetings, but it all goes back to the board governs the organization and its employees. If you have a commingling of employees being on the board or vice versa, it becomes very muddled, and it's not a good idea. Individual donors, corporate donors, government grants, private foundations. There's a reason why the vast majority of applications I submit require a board list and an organizational structure with names. They want to make sure there's no overlap. Just don't do it.
And I will also say that when going through grant applications as a foundation, when I worked for a foundation, we would also cross-check those board lists just by doing online searches, going through Candid. So they are vetted pretty closely.
I will say that doesn't mean you don't have influence with your board, and it doesn't mean that you're not a part of decision making. I go to every board meeting. I put reports in every board meeting. I talk probably most of the board meeting. I do a lot of the talking because I'm giving information to board members about what's going on. I'm there for the votes, but I don't participate in the vote. It is up to the board, but they will ask me questions if they have questions about a financial thing or if they have questions about our data. I'm there to give them all of that information, but I don't vote and have decision-making authority from the board.
So quorum, I think hopefully everyone understands the definition is the majority of the board has to be present in order for a vote to be official and to be, a vote that stands true to hold the policy that's being made. So you have to have the majority of your board members, so more than half, present at a meeting in order for any of your votes to be valid. What does the executive board have authority to run the nonprofit? I guess yes. And does everything have to be a vote? Not everything has to be a vote. Typically, what you need to vote on things that are policy usually. You need to vote on things specifically like your annual budget, your audit, policies, anything that has to do with a high level management of the organization. You don't necessarily have to vote on every day-to-day. If at first you may vote on things more granularly than you do as you grow and evolve as a board, because some of those granular things become part of your processes and documented procedures. And so then as you move on, a lot of times those things that you vote on become much more high level.
In the attachment, or one of the resources that I gave you, it's called a sample board handbook. And there's an appendix Appendix B, and it's Robert's Rules of Order, which is how you run meetings. And so it explains kind of what a quorum is and how you call the meeting to order and how you do a vote and what a motion is. So I would recommend, if you have other questions about the process of how you go about voting and making motions and making determinations, read those pages in that sample document that it'll be a follow-up. So it's not like a company where you can just say, I'm handing it over to this person. Good planning would say that, yeah, I have a few people in our organization that are on our leadership team that I think could be a great fit for this role when I'm ready to move on. But at the end of the day, it will be up to the board to decide who the next person is to replace my position, because they're the ones who hire me and they're the ones who pay me and they're the ones who govern the organization. So in a business, I could just say, yeah, my son, when he turns 22, he's going to take over. It doesn't work like that with a nonprofit. With a nonprofit, it's up to the board.
To add to that, the main difference between a nonprofit and a business is, as the founder of a business, I own River City Grant Writing. As the founder of a nonprofit, the community owns that nonprofit. You may have started it, but you don't own it. And that's why we keep going back to governance with the board versus the founder, is ensuring that you understand, as the founder of a nonprofit, the community owns it. That's why when a nonprofit dissolves, you have to state where those funds are going. You don't get to keep them as the founder if you have a positive balance.
I just want everyone to understand that a nonprofit organization is not a way to build wealth. It's not a way to build wealth for your family. It's not a wealth builder. You can make enough money working at a nonprofit to live, a mid-level lifestyle. But this isn't the key to your family having wealth, generational wealth year after year. This isn't going to get you rich. I've been doing this for, like I said, 25 years, and I know darn well that my skill set would transfer into the private business, and I'd probably make twice as much. And so you definitely, when you get into the nonprofit sector as a career, you definitely have to understand that you're going to make less money than you would in the private business. And why do you do that? Because what I don't get paid in money, I get paid in my passion being fulfilled, in the missions in the community that I care about being accomplished. There's a lot of other things that I get from this work that are not compensation. And so I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, and that you're hopefully starting these organizations from an authentic place, because there's a need in your communities that you want to see addressed. This isn't going to get you rich.
I will say that there are ways to do a business that has a positive social impact. So business is not all bad, and I know we're at a nonprofit seminar, but if you cannot get grants, though, if you're starting a business. If you're starting a business, you have to generate revenue through what you're doing. So if you're starting a nonprofit, you can get grant funding to help support your work. But there's nothing wrong with running a business, and then you do get to keep the money. But yeah, you don't get to if you're running a nonprofit. When I leave. I don't get a big bonus or you all heard, right? I gave 5 years of unpaid work to this place, but that just is part of it.
And there's other businesses that you can start. I mean, we could talk about B Corps, and there's some other sort of gray areas where for-profit and nonprofit sort of overlap in a business structure. So you could look into some of those. This isn't a B Corp conference, so that would be a whole separate thing. But there are other organizational structures out there other than nonprofit and your traditional for-profit that can have a community benefit. And also, even if you're a for-profit, 100%, you can still be a philanthropist. Your employees can volunteer in the community. You know, there's definitely a place in participating in the community and being able to sort of achieve some of these things, even as a for-profit. It's just a different structure.
What area did I struggle the most with? At the beginning, the hardest thing was just balancing my personal life and this really intense work and caring a lot about it. But my husband and I started the housing program together, actually when we were engaged. So we worked together and we were married and we were starting the housing program together, and that was a lot. That was really hard. It's really hard when you're doing this kind of work and it's impacting people's lives. At the beginning, it's hard to separate that. You have to really learn how to have good boundaries and how to go home and still enjoy your family, and raising the money is hard. I mean, it's you can have all the resources and it's still really difficult to get to the point of being paid. Yeah. What did I learn? Oh, I've learned so much in this work. I mean, I've learned how to be a good leader, and I learned what a good leader doesn't look like. I've learned how to push through and develop resilience and push through obstacles. And I mean, the number of times I had people tell me, don't do this. The number of times I had people tell me, you're not going to make any money doing this. The number of times I had people tell me, people have tried this and it's failed and it's not going to succeed. So I learned to move through those obstacles. And I just never gave up. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing about myself, but I'm pretty tenacious. So, so the sooner you can get paid, the better. I was young. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. I didn't have kids yet, and I just really cared about it. And so I just did it. I said to my husband the other night, I was like, I don't know if I could do that now. So, I just pushed hard through it. No. The founder actually never assigns board member. Well, maybe when you're very first, you choose your 3. But after that, the board has to vote new board members on, and your board terms follow your bylaws. So that's where I had those sample bylaws in the presentation. So our bylaws state that every board member serves a 2-year term, and the most number of terms they can serve is 3. So the most years they're serving is 6 years consecutively, and then they have to come off the board.
The most successful new and small nonprofits that I've seen that have grown the fastest have taken their mission and vision, fine-tuned it, and then found other organizations around them to collaborate with and supplement their services with those partnerships. As a nonprofit leader, you have a huge heart and you want to meet everyone's every need, but it's impossible to do that. So what you have to do is figure out what you're really good at, what you're most passionate about, and find other people around you, like you had mentioned, to surround yourself and be able to refer to each other back and forth, supplement each other, collaborate on grant applications, and different things that lift up your individual organizations together. It's critical. You can't start a nonprofit and do it all yourself as an executive director. You can't. You have to rely on volunteers when you first get started. You have to rely on other nonprofits in your community. You have to be willing to share the struggle, and you have to be willing to let go of a little bit of the control.
And if I can add to that, we are seeing, that's one of the things that our office is really available to help with. We're seeing a lot of collaborative granting available. And I have been doing a lot of just networking within different organizations and municipalities to try to connect individuals and organizations so that we can try to get some of these collaborative grants connected in the district. Because I think there is a lack of communication, and also, we're seeing at the nonprofit level, executive directors and development people just don't know who to talk to. So that's really what my role was created for. If I can be a liaison for a nonprofit to say, like, we have a pass-through grant that we see coming through from the federal government, and it needs to go through like a city or a county. Who do we talk to at that level? Please come to our office. I am happy to help facilitate that grant introduction. That's what my job was created for, and that's something that we are more than happy to do.
I recommend even more so that you get paid for what you're doing. And that's where I've worked with Kathryn, and already just in the few months that you've been with the office have found opportunities and grants that are available for, especially there's more of those out there right now that are supporting minority entrepreneurs. And you should definitely get paid. 100%. It's okay to get paid. It's good to get paid. You should get paid. And then we have a huge focus at AYA on hiring people with lived experience who can relate to the young people that we serve. And that's core to everything that we do. And so if you look at our board, you look at our leadership team, you look at our staff, it's vital. And so then that means that we try to pay well to everybody, because we understand that there's so much systemic racism going against doing this work.
I also think when you're starting up, if you can start with a structure of a job that's living wages with benefits, full-time, if you can structure those types of positions and get into that sort of habit, this is the way we do our work. We want to make sure that we're providing living wages to people, and that we are offering opportunities to folks that are actually going to help them pay their bills and pull themselves up, So it's good to be able to start that out right at the beginning and make that a part of your normal culture. A lot of times you're at first you just want to get paid anything, so you'll take minimum wage or whatever, but then you start to set that standard for yourself as an organization, and that's you want to make sure you're coming out the gate making sure that you're making a living wage, and working with the funders to help you to do that. If a funder doesn't want you to make a living wage, they're probably not the right funder for you.
There are some large nonprofits that I just saw posting for one in Philadelphia that is $400,000 a year. So that's the salary of the CEO. So I guess I don't know if you could own a jet with 400,000. I don't make that much money, so I don't know. But but yeah, it's unethical to accept a gift to you like that if it's for the organization. So I don't know. It belongs to the organization. Now, not to you. I get my salary My salary belongs to me. That I can spend on what I want. If I want to go on vacation or try to put a down payment on a jet, I suppose I could. But if someone gave us a jet, it belongs to the organization, not me. Yeah, so I'm here today for like on me. I didn't use organization time. I'm not counting this as hours worked. I'm just doing it for me. So if I were to get a fee or something, that'd be because I was here for me. If I was here for AYA and I got paid, I would give that money to AYA. Mm-hmm. Oh, a foundation gives money. Kathryn worked at a foundation, so a family one. So
Yeah, a foundation is solely in the intention of a foundation, I should say, is is solely to give away money. It's to take in money only and to give it away. Yes, they're donors, and there's also all kinds of funds that where money can sit and accrue interest, and it is like there's entire sectors that is just dedicated towards managing those finances. West Michigan is actually one of the largest areas of private foundation equity, I think, in the United States. There is quite a bit of foundation funding here.
it depends on the size of the organization. We just got a retirement account, like a 401k, IRA, 3 years ago. So now I contribute money in, and now the company matches it just like they would anywhere else. I don't get like a pension or anything like that. I just get whatever I contribute to it, just like if I was working at Costco and I had a 401k, be the same thing.
It has to be a receipt. Now, the actual parameters of the receipt, you can find that on Michigan Nonprofit Association. They have a resources tab. I'm sure we could send those out as well. There are specific requirements, but a receipt, whether it be mailed or sent via email, is required.
If it's like incorrect, the foundation will request a correction.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody, okay, so you know when you go to Goodwill, if you donate something to Goodwill and then they can ask you if you want a receipt, they give it to you blank. So if it's money, the nonprofit has to give you a receipt with the amount and it has to be correct. If it's not money, if it's what's called in kind, like a sweatshirt or something, you just give a blank one and then it's the donor's responsibility to fill the amounts out.